2, 1, go.
Alright. So, have you ever had that neighbor? That neighbor right beside you that's always got the junk in the yard, the one that's always trying to just bag on someone or beating down, and just that really poor neighbor that just is always trying to talk to you, but you feel that you just don't involve yourself with him because he's over here kind of like, yeah, not the shabbiest person you want to mess with, but hey, he's there and he's your neighbor and you're close, right? Well, that's kind of the situation between the United States and Cuba. Now, considering the United States and Cuba have had a lot of different issues in the past with their Cold War situation and what was going on back then to the situation that they are in today at this point in time, I just want to look at the overall normalization of the U.S. and Cuban relationship. Now, I want to look at three little things here. I want to kind of break it down and look at the very beginning piece of why this kind of relationship overall just was horrible in a sense and what kind of brought it to the point where it's at right now. And then I want to look at the situation of trying to solve for this little, trying to figure out a way to normalize the actual relationship between Cuba and the United States. And last but not least, I want to look at the current situation that we're facing right now. So back in the olden days when, the Cold War was very bad, very deadly, and overall nobody liked it, one of the worst parts about it was the fact that Cuba is probably was one of the biggest neighbors of the United States, and it was a good trade partner, and then they became a communist company, or a communist group in the long run, and they worked with the Soviet Union. And there's just a whole bunch of little things along the way that just made them seem like that really poor old neighbor. They just kept throwing more junk and more junk out in their yard. And by the time that there's to the time where you're just like, okay, we're not working with you anymore, and you build that fence to make yourself be able to not communicate with that neighbor anymore because, hey, you don't want to be communicating with the guy that literally just throws all of his junk out in his yard. And that's kind of the case with Cuba. Horrible human rights, horrible situation with their own community, with their own government, horrible overall humanization. It's not a good situation to be working with. And the situation that we have to face by having that horrible neighbor over here that just wants to throw all the junk out, we don't want to deal with that. And so what we did, we put up the embargo, we put up the trade acts, we try to keep it preventing so that we don't have to involve ourselves with this poor neighbor. Now don't get me wrong, there's still a diplomatic situation that we need to be able to communicate with them. However, because of the fact that they were already involved themselves in the Soviet Union during the Cold War, we still do not want to have that communication. However, times have been changing so very much. In 2014, when Obama became president, everything started to change. Obama was just like, hey, you know what, let's just give him a chance here, and he decided to open up a little bit of the operations to be able to communicate and trade a little bit with the ability to talk with Cuba. Now, by doing that, he allowed for a lot of the people to freely go over there, freely visit the area, tourist situations. I mean, don't get me wrong, the situation over there is still a poor neighbor. They still have junk on their yard. They still have horrible human rights. They still have no good humanization. The rules there are absolutely credible, and overall the government is struggling as a whole. But hey, we can have diplomatic matters. We can communicate with them. We're starting to edge to a point where we can use Cuba again. However, the situation still stands. Cuba is still that poor neighbor, the guy that wants to throw all of his trash out on the yard. And so, because of that, to the time that we're facing today, Trump now stands up at the top, and as he did with the immigrants, as he did with Mexico, as he did with China, we're cutting our ties off with the other people. And once again, Cuba is another person that we're starting to cut and put and make sure that these walls stay still. Now, one of the interesting things here is that, do you really want to have a diplomatic matter with a country that's struggling, doesn't have anything to give back, and overall will just become a huge kick in the back and will just suck the blood out of you? Not really. And that's kind of the situation that we're facing right now by normalizing U.S.-Cuban relationships. Overall, I guess we can have the diplomatic matter to communicate. That's great and all. However, if all they're going to do is suck our resources and hurt our country, then what's the point? Trump is strong there, and he's going to stay that way as well. In the end, trying to normalize these relations really isn't that great for the United States. Trump recognizes that, and he puts the walls up, and he keeps them there. We tried giving them a little bit of an edge so that we can have diplomatic matters. That was wonderful. That was a great start. However, once again, there's still that poor neighbor that just throws all their junk out to the yard. Human rights problems, fighting, horrible governments. It's a problem, and it won't get any better. Now that is pretty much what all the normalization about the U.S.-Cuban relationships is all about. Thank you.